Blessings, everyone. Welcome back for Taurus 3. We're all excited to be here. And again, I'm here with KD Decan. Hey, KD, thanks for being back. And David Fisher. Hey, David. So, Taurus 3, how are we feeling? We've made it this far, so far. Let us know how you're feeling and engage below. So today is Friday the 13th, and we feel excited to be recording our Saturn Decan, which I haven't announced. Okay, so Venus is the ruler and of the Decan itself because of Taurus, and now we've got Saturn coming in as the sub-ruler or the co-ruler for Decan 3, and it's Friday the 13th, which I just thought was incredible. KD, you said you looked some stuff up on Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah. It is interesting because the 13th is so feared, and kind of associating that with Saturn. One of the things that I read, which was interesting, is that it is the most feared date in the world, and that people tend to, especially if you're quite superstitious, tend to avoid doing their normal routines around this time. And for those in the US and many parts of the Western world, the 13th floor of buildings is often not existent. It's very interesting, the associations with the number 13.
Yeah, it's non-existent like Saturn, right? Like they don't put the 13th floor, and Saturn restricts,
right?
Or is non-existent or something like this, or rebellious or outside of the norm, or takes a step outside, and it's no, we just don't do the 13th floor or whatever.
Or just called by the wrong name, because 13 is there whether you want it or not. There's no fact that there's nothing that will change the fact that the 13th floor is there. It's just called 14 for some reason.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. It's not like they build the 13th floor and just leave it empty and just an ominous empty floor, right?
Yeah.
Recalling it, so it's kind of like feigned appearances, which is also Saturn to recall. Yeah, that's cool, David. So I don't know if this is true. I don't know the origins. I'm totally, if you hear this and you know more about this than me, please comment down below and educate us and help us know more about this. And I honestly can't remember where I heard it also, but it's just stuck with me for years. It's probably old, super old story and old news. But around Friday the 13th, I had heard that it was, I guess you could call it a pagan origin, where Freya, the goddess Freya, was kind of the most hierarchical, god or goddess of the time, and she was hailed as the top or whatever, and Freya and Friday was named after Freya, so it was Freya's day, Friday, and obviously Venus and Freya and the goddess and the earth mother Freya, all this stuff, and that the number associated with Freya was 13, or it was her favorite number, and I think it had something to do with the 13 moons or the moon cycle, something like this. And so it was a celebrated day because it was less common, because it was when the favorite number in the moon cycle of 13 fell on Freya's day or whatever. And so it was actually a day of celebration pagan wise, but then considered to be the worst day of all, once that narrative switched into male dominated or less female dominated or Christian society, and it was just considered the pagan day, because that was the day that everybody came out and did all their pagan things and celebrated this pagan goddess. So yeah, I thought that was just, that story is stuck with me about Friday the 13th, and now I just think it's that much cooler and that much more awesome and stuff,
I think that's going to be a theme of what we talk about today are, these female, sacred feminine that's converted into rage or vengeance, and not to give too much away, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the Venusian Saturn combo. It's it's been restricted. It was this female celebration, and now it's been completely restricted, and it's considered scary and evil and not to be celebrated and all that. So it's so on theme, which why I thought it was just so cool that we ended up having a free time to record this today. So thanks for going through that with us. We are currently 2 days into the Decan, and I just wanted to note for everybody that when we were organizing this, I mean, this is kind of a glimpse into our organization. But when we were organizing this, we didn't know, should we record it at the end, because then we'll have experienced the Decan and we can talk about our, you know, experiences with it. Should we record it at the beginning so it can hit people right when it comes out and it's hot like that? Like, is it more something we want to experience and kind of like steep in? So we had gone back and forth. We do it beginning, middle, end, and then we're like, let's just let it float and let's just see how each Decan goes. Sometimes we'll have to pre-record, but ultimately we want to record while the Decan is happening. Sometime within that, we want to record it. So whether we hit it right when it starts or whether we hit it at the end. But currently we're 2 days into the Decan and I already have some personal stories to tell. So I want to, you know, make way for that. If you are liking and following us and finding this work of value, let us know through the YouTube love language, which y'all know what it is. We're gonna start off with a little bit of news straight out of the gate before I get into like personal stories. This is a big one, okay? So this is bells and whistles. It's really big for all of us. We are going to be at Norway. I'm freaking out. We're all going to be there. David won't be there this year, which we're so sad, but probably next year. We weren't able to get it organized. But David, we will miss you. And we will be, I mean, I would love to do like a live stream with David at night. So like, we'll see what we can actually pull together because this schedule is.
Yeah, I hope I'm not going to miss it too much because you're going to be there live streaming everything. So that's on you.
David will be with us in pocket and, you know, I'll do what I can. I don't know what the restrictions are going to be with cell phones and recording and all that. So if I can, I'll do live stuff. If I can't, I'll do like video montages and try to go live at night, depending on how much energy me and Katie have, because it's crazy, right? It's
going to be a party.
Yeah, it's a party. So we are so excited that we're going. Like, I've been waiting and waiting to tell. I'm like packing, I'm freaking out. I'm completely freaking out. So I did start an Instagram. I know I've mentioned this before, but I started a Hellenistic Astrology Instagram that's pretty much unused, and I'm sorry. But what I'm saying now is to go over there because I think that's how I'm going to do like all the live stuff. If we do like long form stuff, it'll probably be on like a YouTube live. But if I'm doing like little cuts and little pics and little freakouts, I'm going to do it on Instagram stories. So go over there and follow on Instagram. I'll try to keep you updated. And I think I might even start putting like the Decan images. I'm just going to start to use more of the Instagram. And it's going to start for this Norwalk thing because it'll be an easy way just to keep you guys in on the live in action vibe of Norwalk. So follow us, Hellenistic Astrology at Norwalk. Oh my God. So yeah, Norwalk, for those of you that don't know, is the Northwest Astrological Conference. And it is like a West Coast based meeting. It's in Seattle. And there's other ones like ESAR that happens in Colorado. Those are the two big ones. But Norwalk has a special place in astrological history because it's kind of like where, you know, in the stories that I hear, it's where like, you know, a lot of people met in the beginning days. Like I think even part of like Project Hindsight, people met there, and Dimitri talks about, you know, meeting people there. And, you know, so it's kind of a rootsy, old school, popular gathering. And of course it's West Coast, so that does make sense or whatever. But yeah, so that's what Norwalk is. So Northwest Astrological Conference, and you guys should totally stay with us. Check it out. We're going to do as much as we possibly can. And I don't know what that will be. And on that note, I mean, this is personal. But just to like, you know, it's kind of a confession hole that I'm actually a pretty private person. So coming on here and doing these videos is like outside of my comfort zone. And letting you all in, but at the same time, I'm really into connecting and one-on-one, and I do want to like open my space and my heart to being, you know, open with you all. So just support me in that. Like, you know, if I'm not doing as many videos or really content driven on some of these other platforms, it is, you know, it is a growing experience for me, and there are some like places of resistance. Just, I don't know if it's because of like my age or if it's just because of my personality and kind of my constitution, but I've always just been really private. So it is a leap for me to sort of share my experiences with you all. It is one that I want to do, But if you're not seeing a lot, or if I'm lagging behind, or if I'm slow to go on getting on all these platforms, that's why. So honestly, your comments, support, and just like patience with that part of my disposition is really valuable to me, and I do want to connect with you all. So if you do see me at NORAC, please come up to me. Like, come up. I want to make friends. I want to meet new people. But if you don't see a lot of presence and you're like, where is she and what is she putting out, or should be on TikTok and all of these things, I do want to, but it's a slow burn for me, and there's some levels of resistance, but I'm going to try. And going to NORWAC and doing these Instagram stories is me trying. So I hope you guys see it and come and do it with me. I'm really excited about it. So the next thing, I swear to God, we're about to get into, this is just one more thing. We are doing like a read along study buddy thing with Demetra's new 2nd volume book. David and another friend of ours from the Astrological Encyclopedia, Matt, we're all doing this project as a read along. And I'm sure KD will be a part of it and everything, but I just wanted to remind you all, because I think we're going to start around June or the end of June with that. And you can sign up over on Patreon. We have like different tier levels, like for people that might not be able to afford it or whatever, but it's a study buddy companion vibe. So we can all read the book together and get into it together and discuss things and look at charts around it. And I am very, very excited about that too. So yeah.
Matt's channel is the Astrologer's Encyclopedia. And the
Did
link
I
will
say it
be...
wrong? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And the link will be in the description, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to link it below, and we'll link the Patreon if you guys want to get involved. But it's coming up, right after NORWAC. That's our big thing that we're doing, is this study buddy group with the book. And I am pumped. And I think, God, everybody's got to be just like digging in. If everybody's like slowly receiving their books, right? Like, I got it, now I got it, now I got it, is like being shipped to different people and getting there at different times. So it's also one of these things that has a lot of momentum behind it, kind of like it does for me with NORWAC. Like, very excited. Like, we've all been waiting for the book. So to do it with you all makes me kind of, like squeal and happy. So I hope you guys join us.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it is. And behind the scenes projects, we're cooking up a lot. Like, I have some serious things in the work that we were trying to get done for NORWAC, and we might still get done for NORWAC, but soon. So there just is a lot of momentum building, and I can't wait to share some of the other like behind the scenes projects we're working on as well. Okay, so one more thing, David, the thumbnail thing. So I was like so blown away by your cousin's art. Like, I've been doing these thumbnails, like magical thumbnails for this, and I've been having so much fun with it, but I'm just like doing it on like free Canva and just like doing it at night, like on my phone. But your cousin's an actual graphic artist and doing, yep, this is the Aries 3 Burning Rose, the Aries 1. That one you did, I think. I'm not sure who did that one, but that one's cool too.
No, this one is just because it's in my gallery, and you guys are going to see another picture here.
I love this one because you had that double-headed axe. Yes, and I just love his work. It's so cool. It's like minimalistic, and you're getting in all those like really good like key elements. And I just,
yeah, this is the latest post one for the Taurus 2 video with the High Priestess, if you guys remember, and the Hierophant and the Six of Pentacles. And so this is the symbolism that he came up with while I was explaining and showing him the features of the cards. Yeah,
it's just so good. And when David showed this to me, I was like, I would just want to feature it because, first of all, then you'll know what you're looking for. So what David's doing on his channel are basically short clips of this. So if you can't listen to this because it's long and draws out, or you have to listen to it in spurts, but you want to get the, major quick take or hot take, that's what we're doing on David's channel, is like a quick brief version of the Decans. And so look for those images. Now you'll start to see art with that similar
yeah,
aesthetic.
and his handle is on Instagram. His handle is on the picture for Instagram. If you guys look back, rewind a little bit of the video, you'll be able to check it out there.
We'll link it all too, but I will link it all. It's just, his art is super cool. The minimalistic style of the thumbnails is great. And I just wanted to, I was like, David, we got to show and we got to talk about what he's doing. And then also look for that aesthetic, because you can see kind of like a running theme of the aesthetic. So if you're seeing those pop up, like when you're seeing our videos pop up, it is like our companion style over on David's channel. So look for those thumbnails. All right. So with that, my esoteric magical buddies, should we dive in? So 36 Faces, the history and astrology of magic and magic of the Decans by Austin Coppock. Austin calls this Decan a string of prayer beads. T. Susan Chang calls it Fail Better, which I love and we'll definitely get into. But the themes that I guess my takeaways, and I'm about to read you a little bit, some excerpts, some highlights from the 36 Faces. But what I get are things of, and I think he might even put it this way, but these themes of repair and repentance. So we've got these themes of like toil and humility, but also repair and repentance, which I think was really interesting with the beads, the prayer beads, and the power of preparation as well as humility. So I'm going to read a few excerpts now from Austin's book. So we see in the first decan of Taurus that great plans were laid, and in the second, success was obtained. The third represents a confrontation of destructive factors which impede completion. So this decan shows victims of circumstance and victims of hubris. He also points out that in the 36 areas of the zodiac, fragmentary Hellenistic astrological texts that we've mentioned a few times, we've got the spirits of Laitai, and these are diamonds or daimones, a female version of diamond, whose name can be translated into prayer, which we'll get into a little bit more, where Austin talks about the ability to sort of like toil and also I guess ask or petition in that. So you're doing your work, but then you're also petitioning for help. And we'll get into that a little bit more when I'm reading from the end, because he kind of bounces around a little bit here. But then he also talks about Ate, and I'm not sure if I'm saying any of this right, so correct me if I'm wrong. But we've got Ate, who is a daughter of Eris, the name means ruin or folly. And she was like a troublesome spirit that gets cast out of the heavens by Zeus, which I also thought was like very Saturnine, because it's almost like Lucifer, the fallen angel, or that gets kicked out of, and Lucifer or loose or light was a name for Venus. So I thought, wow, we got the Venus there, and we've got the casting out version of like that Saturn signification. So Ate was cast out of the heavens. But here's what I thought was like cool. She did not fall all the way to earth. Instead, she landed upon the heads of men, which we're going to talk about. KD, I know you're going to talk about. I won't ruin it. So she landed upon the heads of men, whom she used as stepping stones, bringing a ruin and inspiring folly upon whoever's cranium she treads, which I just thought was fun. And then he goes on a little bit about the Ate Laite duad, and it talks about agency, and then goes into the Seven of Pentacles. So sometimes, and this is a quote, sometimes catastrophe befalls us through no apparent fault of our own, and the wise acknowledge what is revealed here, making plans to accommodate the unforeseen. And this is kind of where I was getting that preparation, humility. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes catastrophe befalls us all through no apparent fault of our own. Maybe this is where I'll interject a little personal story. That last night where I lived, there was this incredibly destructive storm, and I had to like retreat to this like cold, damp, dark basement, which is very Saturnine. And what had happened was there was like 80, 85 mile an hour winds, in some places tornadoes and things like that, but it was mostly the winds. And these winds were ripping out the biggest trees because they have the most resistance and they're sort of the heaviest to contend with. And so all over my town are these giant trees completely ripped up by the roots. And you just see all this earth and all of these roots. And I just thought that was such a earthen Taurus image and a Saturnine image of the root system, the ancestors, the big trees. And one of these trees, these giant trees that we have, or I mean, giant is relative where I live, but this like 400-year-old tree that was in front of my grandma's cabin. So this is very, you know, personal. But my grandmother, so we've got elders, you know, had this huge tree right on the banks of the water, which is also super Saturnine. And it got ripped out from the banks, but just barely missed, you know, the little cabin that's on her property. But tomorrow, which is Saturday, which is, you know, Saturn's day, I'll be helping my grandmother cut this ancient wood and like remove it. And so I just thought, you know, and it's coming from this storm. So not only in the middle of eclipses, but we've got this kind of catastrophe that befalls us through no fault of our own that Austin was talking about, you know, and we're 2 days into the Decan. So it was like, the first day I have a story, and then the second day I have a story. So I'll throw that in there, that this sort of natural disaster feeling came right with the Decan and really called it in for me personally, like hiding in the basement and then helping, you know, my seniors with this old ancient tree. And it's also labor and toil, and like we'll be out there with the axe, and you know what I mean? So had to share that, just couldn't skip over that. And then just to kind of conclude, Austin goes on to say, those who walk this Decan will face disaster on a variety of scales. Yet these seeming catastrophes offer a twofold boon. The first is to learn to bear the brunt of terrible mistakes and turns of fortune. And the second is to learn the way of remedy suggested by the Laite. For we are never powerless when our words reach the ears of those who are willing and able to help us. And remember, Laite is prayer or petitioning. Thus, the power to call upon a greater power in order to atone for folly or to repair damages done is a great place here. So he's saying, like, if we need to sort of reckon with that humility on any way, whether it's to the gods or to, you know, in our lives, that this Decan is a great place to start for that. And just, I'm going to take us out with this last paragraph. It's just too poetic to not read the whole thing. So while repair and repentance certainly feature prominently, equally important is the power of preparation. Acts, both magical and mundane, to ward off the visits of evil are potent in this space. Furthermore, the acquisition of allies who can reverse the dire turn of fortune is equally fortuitous, whether those helpers be kind spirits or the contracted devils of an insurance agency. Ultimately, this phase teaches us how to preserve our work, both from our own folly and from the Titan's rages.
That was very poetic. Yes.
It's beautiful, isn't it? So then just to conclude, I wanted to tell, like, before we jump into T. Susan Chang and Katie can take us away on that, I wanted to tell one more personal story that last night after I got out of the basement, David was with me for a little bit and the storm was over and I came back up to take a shot, like a cleansing, like kind of spiritual, like shower of the storm and like all of these things. I was reflecting on my day, and what ended up happening is I took my nephew, shout out to my nieces and nephews, they love that I'm on YouTube. He's 5 and I took him out to see these baby lambs at my friend's pasture. She has sheep that she allows to just be in her pastures, and we do it every year. And this year, when we went out to see the lambs, we're walking through the forest and we find this mama. And at first we thought the baby was dead. We couldn't see the baby moving, the baby sheep. And I was like, oh, Maddox, let's not go close, because I didn't want my Maddox to be like, hey, baby lamb, and then have it be passed away. And then finally, you know, so I went back in and asked my friend, the reason we were there helping her, she broke her leg, so she can't do the lambing or whatever. Anyway, which is also apropos for the Decan. So then she's like, no, you can go close. It's fine. Just check it out and see, you know. She's like, I checked on them the other day. They were both, you know, they just had him the day before on the first day of Decan 3 of Taurus. So we go back out and it was twins. The mom had twins. And there was one baby lamb that was big for, you know, 2-day-old lamb, but it was like spry and it's the same color as its mama. So it was like the mama's like sheep color, you know, like a khaki color, and the baby's like this khaki, like bright white color. And then we see the other twin, and it was like laying unmoving, and it was white but with a full black head. And then we went to get it, and it was so tiny. Like, she's like, oh, that happens with twins sometimes, but it was so tiny and it could barely get its legs under it. So our task was to get this mama and her 2 babies from the pasture walked into a small contained area so that she could make sure that the baby was suckling, the one with the black face. So she wanted to make sure that the baby could get the nutrients. And I just thought, whoa, on the first day of this Saturn thing, this one baby lamb was like so much more smaller and like malnutritioned, and like we had to actually contain them or pen them up, which is a Saturnine thing to do. Instead of letting them run free, we had to trap them in a smaller place, for lack of better words, so that we could make sure that the baby was suckling off the mommy. And I thought that was so Saturn and Venus, right? It's got birth, it's got the restriction of these 2 baby lambs to make sure they're getting the nutrients that they need, and the one maybe falling short of that nutrients or falling short in size, or not one of the other baby lambs like all spry, right? Just teeny, and you know.
I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I think that sheep are Saturnine, aren't they? Because you have that growing, because of why they're serving the purpose for humanity. They grow hair and they're seasonal. And there's a right season for taking out for harvesting the hair and for wool and all of that.
It absolutely very well could be, because I know wool is Saturnine because it's used in like all the Saturnine stuff, and it's always black wool and
As
wool.
with like livestock, right? Like cattle and things that are used as beasts of burden, which maybe sheep might be on the edge of that, but.
Yeah, and I know for sure that goats are, and mountain goats and stuff, and mountain goats and sheep are kind of, you know, like mixed
Very
in
similar,
people's
yeah.
minds.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they're mixed in people's mind too, because Maddie can never remember if we're seeing goats or if we're seeing sheep. And so it is kind of interesting like that.
It can be
Even,
confusing for a child.
yeah, and even when I was doing the Aries decans, it was hard for me to find the difference between the ram and the bull. And a lot of times, even in their skull, like when you see ram skull or sheep skull, it's very hard for someone to tell the difference between a ram skull and a sheep skull. So yes, I'm sure there is some of that, but I just thought that was like just perfect. So it was the sheep thing, and then having to sort of like pen them up, which is super Saturn, and the babies to get their nutrients, and then that crazy storm that like ripped up all these trees. So I was like, okay, I'll tell the personal stories so they're not too, you know, involved or whatever. But I was like, hello, Decan 3, you're here.
I also see a little bit of the Mercury retrograde in Gemini in that story,
Sure.
with the twins and the imbalance in the nutrient levels and needing to go back and take extra measures to like remediate an inequality between the two, kind of. So
Yeah, and we did see the baby latch a couple times. It's
Okay.
just she wanted to, yeah, the baby's not in danger or anything. It's just May wanted to make, that's my friend, just wanted to make sure that she just took extra precautions and could see them. And with her leg broken, she couldn't just like walk out into the pasture as far as she might need to. So we just put them in a small open air space with a little shelter. It's totally fine. The baby was suckling, but it was just super tiny and it had the little black spot, and we just wanted to make sure that it was in the group and not out of the group, you know. So yeah,
There's something to say that yeah, sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. Just the twin thing also reminded me of the upcoming Gemini season. You know, go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say there's something to be also tied in with the fail better in terms of the biological process that occurs in a pregnancy of mammals in general. And I'm not sure about other animals, but even in humans, you have one of the fetuses when it's twins being more well-fed than the other sometimes, and that's happening because the body of the gestation individual is recognizing that one of the fetuses has a better chance, it has better quality of processing of the nutrients somehow from early on, and then even though it continues pregnancy of both, it kind of prefers that, okay, the other one is going to fight for its life. And
Yes, nature
it's
does do
amazing
that.
when they do, and it's amazing when they do thrive somehow. After all of that, they are small, and it's Saturnine children, right?
Completely. And it was
It's
so
like,
cute. And the fact that it even had the black markings on its head, I just thought it was so, and it is true though, that nature will, when we've got this survival of the fittest thing, like even the plants, I think we were talking about in another deck, and like which one's reaching for the light, and they kind of, aren't, feeling bad for this small sprout of grass. It still happens in the animal kingdom where if they have to choose one, and if they split the resources evenly, and this isn't a conscious thing, it's happening in utero or whatever, but they're hoping for the best case of survival. And in this case, it might go to one and not two, which one and not two is kind of harkens Gemini a little bit too, but or even Mercury. But you're right, David, it does. And that's exactly why
that's very Seven of Pentacles, and I wanna let Katie start the conversation on that, because I know she's got some things, and I don't want to jump into her section.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump in.
Susan Chang book 36 Secrets that we have here. This Decan has 3 cards, again, that Elsa mentioned. Taurus is ruled by the planet Venus, which is represented by the Hierophant. And you'll recall that from the last 2 videos that we did for Taurus 1 and Taurus 2 are the Hierophant. David has an example here. Then this Decan is ruled by Saturn, which is the world. Oh yes, let's just pause and look at these 3 cards now.
Well, this is the Hierophant, like an old one. It's just what I had.
Yeah, yep. And then the world is the card that is representative of the planet Saturn that rules this Decan. And that's actually the 21st card. It's the end of the major arcana, the end of the hero's journey. And I'll talk about that a little bit shortly. And then the minor arcana card associated with this Decan is the Seven of Pentacles, often referred to also as the 7 of coins or the 7 of discs. So you may hear any of those terms used to describe this suit, which is associated with Earth, called Earth signs. So David and Elsa have held up a couple examples, and I would like to show a few examples as well. But before I do, I wanted to highlight a couple of things that Chang says in her book to kick it off, which is that this is the first Decan we are analyzing that has to do with Saturn, which is pretty exciting. So that whole new major arcana card, the world, to talk about, and also to point out the interesting combination of Venus and Saturn that you might recognize during this Decan. So I don't think I have any quotes that I want to read right off the bat, but I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about the world first.
Yeah, and I'll say, well, Katie's getting that up in the Hermetic deck, which I'm not sure if I'm the only one with it. So I started to not use like the ones that I know that Katie has or whatever, but in the Hermetic deck, it's called the Universe. And it does have the same like symbolism as the Rider-Waite with the 4 animals, which we'll get into. But all I want to bring to note is the title, which it's called the Universe. And then, they all have a title. This is the Great One of the Night of Time.
Ooh.
The Great One of the Night of Time. And I think that's where we're talking about the greater malefic, and it being like the most malefic in like a night chart or of the night. So the Great One of the Night of Time. And then we also have Saturn as, the sickle, the Lord of Time, that T. Susan Chang mentions in that first paragraph. So yeah, I thought that was really beautiful. And I'll show the card when we get it back up, because it does have the sickle and the eagle and the knight, but something to hold with you, the title, as we go through.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. So yeah, to what Elsa said, these are 3 cards that I have decks for. And so I like to compare these different cards among the different decks to glean some extra symbolism and meaning for what the world means. On the right, you have probably the most familiar representation for those who know tarot from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And this deck is interesting. You'll see the kind of common figure of a circle, a laurel, a wreath, some sort around a naked woman figure in the middle. Surrounding this figure are four kind of, I guess, visions or dreams or imaginations, these figures crowded amongst clouds. We have the bull down here, which represents Taurus, the lion, which represents Leo. We have the eagle, which is a traditional association with Scorpio, the sign of Scorpio. And then we have a human figure, which sometimes is depicted as an angel, but really what it is the water bearer representing Aquarius. So it's these fixed signs that are represented around the world, which is a really interesting thing to note, is often mimicked in other decks as well. On the left here, I have a card from the Dreaming Way deck, which is the world. And I love this because it doesn't fully show the full circle around the figure, and clearly it's not a naked woman, but you do get kind of the feeling of an arch happening right behind him. You get the kind of nature vibe, the agriculture and the growth vibe from this. And then you can even take a look, if you zoom in on his book, he has a lion, a bull, an angel, and there's probably an eagle in there somewhere. But so that's just another representation of that fixed element really being associated with this card. And we know that Saturn rules the sign Aquarius, for instance, so that association does make sense.
I see the little eagle head.
I see the little eagle head as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you know, that just on this card, a couple notes is like the glasses, like Saturn, like, so we see an old man. Okay, so Saturn is old man. He's this old man, he's a sickle bearer, all of this. Saturn's associated with pipes and smoking. And Saturn's also associated with not seeing.
Oh, interesting.
How interesting.
Interesting.
So pipes
Sleeping,
and
and his eyes are closed.
yes, and not seeing, and how the glasses are down and he's sleeping. And so it does have a lot of these deep Saturn things, because Saturn is, sleeping, ignorance, not being awake, and also not seeing. Like, its feigned appearances is seeing everything around you except for the selective one thing that you know are intended to see, like how the sun would, opposite theme of Mundi vibe again. So that card really does have a lot of symbolism built in.
Yeah, lots of Saturn there. And then in the middle, we have the Mother Peace deck, represented the 21, the world, by this figure. In the companion book that comes with the Mother Peace deck, the figure in the middle is referred to as the Great Mother, and also referred to as Maya Shakti, which I was hoping Elsa could maybe translate and talk a little about.
I can try, not being like fully prepared on the history. Shakti, we talked about in the last Decan, which is the Yoni principle. It's like the primordial spark of the feminine. So like any female energy, any goddess would refer back to this concept of Shakti. Shakti lives in all things. Shakti is this sort of life force that is attendant in all things. And then Maya, it can either be like the illusion of Maya, but Maya is also the word for like Mother Earth. Like, it's like this material realm. You could say like everything is Maya, right? When we refer to like everything is Maya, we refer to everything is an illusion. We're talking about the cyclical nature of karma and time when we talk about Maya. So yeah, you can see that really easily here with this sort of wheel of life depicted so awesome in the bodies, of just like living in all things, and that cyclical nature of time and karma. That's Maya, and Shakti is what creates life in general. And then we see that representation of that in the snake that coils goddess's arm. Which the representation for Shakti in Shiva Shakti energy is the snake, which is interesting when we think about the Garden of Eden and the wreath that goes around. What is it with the snake in its own tail?
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got this that cyclical nature of the Maya, the time, the Mother Earth, the turning of the
lemniscate, also with the wreath in the world of the Rider-Waite and in the symbol that the snake makes.
Yeah, and you know, that reminds me of something else that actually Chang mentions in her book. This circle, this almost egg shape in the traditional vision of the Rider-Waite-Smith, is it's containment and protection as much as it is, you know, a nice design element of the card. But those are both Saturn words. Again, the containment and protection of life, of consciousness, is what allows us to sort of keep on going in the material world as it is.
Like
What
the
does
containment
give
of
us-
the babies, right? Like we had to contain the babies, or like an egg has that hard shell in order to contain the preciousness within and the preciousness of the idea of life within.
I see it also as a reference to the one in the dyad, because you have the woman in the middle being a representation of the feminine energy, which is a recall to that dyadic principle of the multiplicity and being connected to that multiplicity. And the one symbol being the limit symbol around it, which refers to Saturn being a date planet as well, that sets limits, selects, defines things, even if by the act of ignoring them. Right?
And you see it in the fixity of the signs being called upon as well.
Exactly. It's the fixed signs around it. So it's that kind of definition from experience. That's like you're able to see something and call it by what you see, because you had experienced it before. And the world has a way of being like this moment of, oh, I see it now. Eureka, I've been through everything around this and I don't need to anymore. And now I can choose. I am above it, because you can put your mind around it. Literally, you can wrap your mind around it.
And here I thought it was really interesting. I just wanted to just recall us back to the purple garment seen in the Emperor in the beginning of the zodiacal signs. You remember the Emperor is lavishly draped in the purple in one of the cards. I think it's the mother piece.
Yeah.
But here again, we see that Jupiterian or kind of royal purple, but just subtly about. There's no like clinging, right? It's like showing that what you're saying, David, that sophistication of the world, or that like ending period, but completely sort of unbridled by it and just sort of surrounded by it, but not contained by it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And she's holding two batons
Yes.
in her hand. And I feel like that's the two of wands kind of represented in there, of like being assertive and being like, okay, I can define this. I can see that Emperor reference as well, with the little globe in the hands of the two of or in the scepter of the two of wands, and in the Emperor of having a broad vision, right?
Yep, exactly. And even the magician, right, where we've got these wands, it's almost like this signifying of like wherever we use these scepters and these wands are like powers, but she's got them down and loose, same as she's got this mastery and almost like not like it's futile, but just like this complete, like the ending of a chapter, so tranquil and just lightly held, just like the robe is, right?
I've also seen those batons referred to as candles being burned at both ends, indicating like a massive amount of like effort and activity and endurance, that I would also associate with Saturn. But to go back to a term that I heard you both use a lot, being limits or limitations, and containment. One of the reasons why that is a term associated with Saturn is because it is the outermost planet visible in our solar system to the naked eye. Thus, it is the traditional planet in astrology that is the furthest away from the Earth and from the sun. So what's really interesting about that limiting factor is that it's also the end of the major arcana, 21, the world. It's like the end, the culmination of the hero's journey that the Fool has encountered throughout the 21 or 22 cards.
And it's perfect here. I mean, it's just so beautiful. We've got that sort of vibe bringing in the, of course, Saturn being the end and representing like time and the boundaries beyond time and limit and limitless and like all of those things, right? Those big concepts that are packed into Saturn. But just how it comes, you know, Saturn's the lord of agriculture. And so then you've got this Taurian, like planting, farming, and then you've got here Saturn coming in the last decan of Taurus, just bringing in these deep things. It reminds me again of like lessons in endurance, right? Yes. That ultimate culmination of the turning of the wheel, in that endurance way, like the fixed signs would have, like Saturn, limits and bounds, what's protecting, what's meant to be rebelled against.
And that's a theme through Chang notes. That's actually a theme through all the Saturn ruled decans. She says specifically the quotes that I underlined were freedom depends on limits. And what Saturn says is this far and no further. This is the end.
You know, I talk about this in yoga a lot to my students, about freedom comes from limitation, and it's a hard thing for you to kind of understand at first, but you notice it deeply in your own body and in your own breath. Like there's no way that an athlete is going, or an artist is going to be experiencing these, like think of a ballet dancer, let's say. They've got this like freedom of expression of body, and that only comes through time and restriction, restriction of habits, endurance of habits, you know, like the more we can be more free in our own bodies, the more limitations we sort of apply to it, and the more rigor we apply to it. And, you know, it goes for the yoga postures and the breath itself. The more structured the pose becomes, the more freedom we have in it.
So I also wanted to briefly compare the World and the Hierophant cards, which are the two major arcana. One of the things I found interesting in both of these cards are you don't often see greenery and nature represented in the Hierophant nor in the World, but here I really like it. It's an interesting view of Saturn and Taurus that we have compared dynamically in the Dreaming Way deck, and then we have the Rider-Waite-Smith. But yes, David, let's talk about the Seven of Pentacles.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Seven of Pentacles in that Saturnian way that we were referring, because the Seven of Pentacles, it might be like lessons that you learn through time, like to discipline you. And a great component of discipline is like you learn to give value to things many times and to your resources, and know that they're not going to last forever, because you've experienced lack, and because you've experienced frustration, because you have invested and you haven't had anything in return, which is one of the ways the Seven of Pentacles can be read. The Seven of Pentacles also might mean like I want to tie back to what the, what do you say? What the sheep story that Elsa was telling was saying. One of the little lambs had less nurturing from the mother's body than the bigger one. But that's not stopping the smaller one from thriving. It just means that it will have a different experience of the world since birth. It fought for life. It fought to be alive and to remain there in every way that it could. And this is what Saturn does. And you can't say that it's like a beautiful lamb. It is a beautiful lamb because lambs are beautiful, but it's like it's not the most beautiful like the bigger one would be, you know, preferably in general terms.
It was so cute. I was preferring it, but
it's still there. And
yeah.
I see this little one little coin in at the feet of the Seven of Pentacles as being what you're left with, and you're looking at the rest that didn't come through, and you're just like,
yeah.
And that's just Saturn teaching you to be happy with what you have. Because even though it's not what you expected, and that previous abundance of the six perhaps didn't last forever, you now have an opportunity to do something else, or really redirect your resources and reassess.
Yeah, I want to comment on that, because you were saying something about like through knowing hardship, right? Like this little lamb through knowing hardship, or, you know, it reminds me of what Austin was saying with like preparation, or the wisdom that comes with it is like, you have this fool energy if you're just like, yeah, all my crops are gonna work and they always have, and da da da. It's like only once you've known something harder, you've known some kind of hardship, does that wisdom and that Saturn big time of, but actually it could suck, or but actually this thing that you didn't plan for could happen. And that's like a serious wisdom, like that you would think of as a wisdom of age, right? Like that you become more wise with age. People say that, right? Because you've experienced more and you know how a multiplicity of things could work out. And it's not to crush hope per se, but it can be kind of hope crushing when someone's like, you don't really know because you haven't experienced it this bad, or da, da, da. But it is, it's like that lack. And then, you know, so
and
that
that's ignorance, right? Many times that's blissful ignorance because you're not aware of some, but it's still harming you. It's still they're threatening to come over you if you're not aware of it. If you're
and
not,
when I look at this,
honoring it,
it's true. And when I look at this card, when I've always seen him as like, when I always do this, like when I'm outside, like I'll be doing this tomorrow, like when I'm cutting wood or when I'm doing this manual labor, it's almost like you get this foggy like meditation thing where you just like have to step back, you drink water, and you're just like looking over the project, and you're not necessarily surveying or scanning or anything. You're almost just in this like meditative space because you've put so much toil and effort and energy. There's no like mental energy happening, there's no physical energy. You're just like standing there and like looking at the garden and like gapping out or whatever for a quick second while you take a break. How much have I done? Maybe what I have to do more, but you just kind of like take stock. But it's not this super detail oriented image of taking stock, right? You're just kind of like there looking at your stuff. So it reminds me of this patience, persistence thing. We're just kind of like, oh, like looking and like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm patient to see what will happen. I'm persistent to get back out there. Like the work has to get done. And we'll see what happens, if the crops come through or not. And, you know, a lot of people see this guy as like kind of sad and like downtrodden, and it could be kind of too. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. You're just sitting there, you're a laborer, you're a laborer, and you're kind of just, you know, less than taking stock in this kind of like oriented way, but more just like in the moment of patience and persistence.
Well, his face is quite inscrutable to me, at least, but I think I agree with your assessment that it's like kind of a meditative, just taking a step back sort of situation. But in this, so the Seven of Pentacles is called the Lord of Failure. And one of the things that is historically interesting about the Seven of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is that apparently Pamela Smith Coleman, who was doing the illustrations, based this off of the image from the potato famine of the 1840s, in which, you know, there was a failure of a giant crop of potatoes that resulted in, you know, famine, and also pulled a huge amount of people from what is now the United Kingdom, places all over England and Ireland, to the US. It resulted in a huge migration of people to the New World. It's just a very interesting image when looked at from that perspective, again, calling in these agricultural themes of Saturn, and also calling in the idea of failure. And you could maybe even see it on his face if you have a good imagination, like the wonder, how did this crop fail? How did this happen? I thought I grew this correctly, but I only ended up with one potato at the foot of this gentleman.
Yeah, or even if I have these 7 coins from these crops, once I take it to market, it's not going to be good enough. Or it's not going to last. Like it's right? Famine is a huge Saturn word. So the potato famine, it's like, I mean, yeah, he has this crop. It's got leaves, it's got coins, it happens, but somehow it's not enough, or it's not soon enough, or it's not enough for this guy because he's still like, you know?
Yeah. And
so, yeah.
Well, and, you know, just in general, I think it's kind of a platitude nowadays, right? That you have to fail to succeed, that becoming comfortable with failure eventually brings you success because you learn from that failure. Well, that's Seven of Pentacles if I've ever heard it, you know?
That is
absolutely
it. It is that. It is totally that, where people are like, there is no such thing as failure. Kind of this entrepreneurial Western idea of like, you've got to have like all these startups to like eventually have the one or whatever, like how it's not failure, it's just learning and it's just information and all of that. That is for surely here.
Yeah.
Well, that is good knowledge being applied to sketchy stuff,
Yes.
to say it quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And then do you want to, I want to just comment, and I hope I don't steal what you were going to say, but with the Mother Peace deck, you've got this patience of this lady in waiting, right? Like, I don't know if you ever know like a woman who gives birth in like August or whatever, when pumpkins and melons are ripe, but it's hot, and usually mothers are like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
If you're a Leo, you can bet your mom has stories about her just like, like, I'm ready to go.
Or a Virgo.
Yeah, Virgo, yeah, that could work too. But just the hotness of summer and just the ripeness and just the waiting, like that last trimester, it's just this waiting game.
On a personal level, I have two close friends and colleagues of mine who are in that stage right now, or were just recently had birth and were just recently in this stage. The idea being, you can't do anything. You can't do anything right now. You just have to wait. You have to wait for the fruit to bear. You know, you can't.
And the contractions, which are Saturnine,
the
right?
labor.
The labor, you don't know when it's going to happen. You can't control it. You don't know if it's going to go good or bad. You could die, baby could die. Like, I know that that's not as much of a concern in our nowadays idea of birth, but it's still latent in our psyche, and it's still there. It
still is for a lot of people.
For a lot of people in a lot of places. And you've got that there of just like, you're ready to burst with life, but at the same time you've got the Lord of Death guarding the gates. Are the contractions going to work? Are both people going to make it? And also, I'm waiting. I have zero control over when this decides to happen. It's that kind of natural disaster thing. Obviously a pregnancy isn't a natural disaster, but kind of like, it's just going to befall you when it does.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's big shit. It's a major medical event when you have a child. And, you know, on a slight tangent, I was reading some articles recently that talk about how much more common it is nowadays for women to share their stories of pregnancies and how much they didn't enjoy pregnancy or giving birth. You know, it's because it's like, it's a real medical procedure, and it is very Saturnine. People want to gloss over and only talk about the sunny elements of having a child or the lunar elements of being a mother, but no, there's some Saturn in there. There's some pretty serious Saturn in there.
Oh yeah, all of you moms out there.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, and also all of you moms out there, like,
my mom's a Capricorn. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and the glamorized idea of like this Virgin Madonna and the fertility and the love, and not to say all that juicy ripe fruit isn't there, but I take care of kids. It's fucking Saturn. It is like restricting, it's limiting, it's frustrating, it takes patience and endurance and all of these qualities that, you know, are indicative of what we're talking about. And it's fixed also with that fixed energy, right? It is like, you're stuck.
Yep, nothing to do. So, and I also thought that this was apropos of the discussion of the twins. We don't know, she could be pregnant with twins here, and it might be another linkage that we could talk about, you know, like the body needing to support what's gestating inside of it.
And then we've got the gambling, which talks to me again about, you don't know how it, obviously it's self-inflicted as far as gambling goes, but you've got the idea, like you've got the one person with their head on the table like, you know, and the other person like, oh, I've got all the riches, you know. It's that kind of turn of fate or turn of the wheel, or the kind of idea of like catastrophe striking again, you know. And who's got the abundant crop and who's got the shitty crop, which you don't really necessarily know. It depends on the read of the seven, right? But you've got that same kind of idea of, is it a potato famine, or, you know, for the one person at the head of the table, a complete upturn in scales or whatever.
Yep. Well, and something that I thought was super interesting about this card, and is true of all of the pentacles or coin suite in the Scapini deck, is that they are depicted with even further symbolism on the coin itself. And so I see some pretty Saturnine elements here. We have the scythe, somebody with a scythe down here. We have the moon face. We have, it looks like a baby or a child sleeping up here. The tree of life, fruit-bearing tree. Again, a little bit of that agriculture theme. It looks like a woman being burned alive down here. you know, we can take this in a few different directions.
Honestly, this is why I absolutely love the Scampini deck, and it does it on all the coins throughout. So then you got the treasure in one, right? And so it's like, this deck is amazing for the layers and layers and layers and layers of symbolism, as well as the Hermetic deck is. But it's beautiful to point out and to have this deck and to look at that. And they do talk a little bit about it in the cards, but you know what the woman in flames reminds me of, besides the witch burnings, which is the last decan where we talk about the lady with burning cloth and the child of the same robing.
Yeah, so there was one other thing that I wanted to say about the Seven of Pentacles, which Chang also mentioned in her book, which is Murphy's Law. And Murphy's Law is that if something could go wrong, it will go wrong. And that's basically the energy of Seven of Pentacles. It's the thing that prevents you from being disappointed and accepting the failure. Accept the failure and move on. So and with that, since it's so short in this chapter, I wanted to read the poem at the end of Chang's chapter on Taurus III. So this is an excerpt from Worst Word Ho by Samuel Beckett. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better.
So good. So good.
All right.
Thanks for reading.
Y'all Capricorns out there felt that? Y'all felt that?
Straight to the heart.
Yeah, I love that.
There is another thing I want to mention about the Decan being that's present within this Decan in Taurus, which is the fixed star Caput Algol. Right? We mentioned that we were going to bring this up, and that star is a malefic influence. And as every malefic, you only summon it up when you want to protect yourself from their energy, when you want to imbue yourself with the power to really limit the influence that the negative representation of them might have against you, and things like that. So Caput Algol is a star that magically you can use to bind people, which is a malefic thing, not really nice, to repel enemies, to protect yourself, like protective talismans are a work that you do with that particular star in this decan. So yeah, and there are other things.
To channel rage against aggression.
Right.
That's another way I've heard it used in magic.
Yeah. It's associated with the myth of Medusa. And do you girls want to tell the story of Medusa?
Oh, sure. I also want to mention, though, that the reason why we're talking about Algol is because the fixed star actually falls in this decan. It falls at 26 degrees of Taurus. So since this decan covers 20 to 29 degrees.
Yeah,
so it's close to where the sun is right now, pretty close.
And we actually have some people who were born during this decan that will know were also born with their sun on Algol. So but the Medusa myth is that she was a Gorgon, and we were actually talking a little bit about the origins of her being turned into a Gorgon, which is a monster that has, in her case at least, snakes for hair. That's the common representation, and you'll actually see it on the shield of Athena, a figure of her face. And that is because originally Medusa was a mortal who was a priestess for Athena in the temple, which required her to take a vow of celibacy. And yet she was raped by Poseidon. And when she was raped by Poseidon, it, in essence, ruined her vow of celibacy. And she was then punished by being turned into a Gorgon. So basically patriarchy is awful. And that's all.
Yeah, and that's
period.
Yep.
And that represents like how limits in society, in nature, in life, laws of men mixed in with how things go, really can marginalize individuals, and they become mouthpieces, they become avatars for this malefic energy to manifest on Earth. be it by being themselves marginalized, by being turned into the thing that perpetuates a cycle of toxicity, a cycle of marginalization, of hurt, of everything that is Saturnian in this case. And that is, it is enforced upon also a marginalized figure in society, the woman in this case of this myth in particular.
Yeah, and I know, like, you know, the idea of Mars having to do with some of these like topics, like the trigger words that we were talking about in this story. The idea of Medusa, it wasn't if her gaze fell upon you. Again, we have this gaze of Saturn, right? If her gaze fell upon you, you would turn to stone. Do I have that right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's almost like this form of protection, like you were saying, David, right, for her own self in a weird way. But just the idea of restricting the feminine is, we've got these two key words of Venus and Saturn here. So we've got the feminine Venusian goddess, and then we've got Saturn restricting her and making her gaze that should be loving and motherly turn people to stone, which is Saturn. It's restrictive, it's brutal, or like forced punishment. So when you think of restriction, you think of prisons, right? So you can't, it's this kind of idea of Saturn on the opposite end of, locking someone up, restricting them away, damning them to hell. And in this case, it's marginalized people, women, things like this, you know?
But also, like, with the gaze turning you into stone, I feel like when you are a marginalized individual, your body tells a story. Your story, like your storyline, the way you've lived, tells a societal tale of what's wrong with our current narrative. And you become then something that people avoid looking at, because if they look at you, they see everything that they're afraid of and they can't handle it at once. So it's like this download of knowledge would suddenly pour into them if they empathized with you. And so you represent a threat for them, because their minds will blow, basically, if you make them so aware of things that they try to ignore for a long time, because it is a social trait.
Yeah, because they must, that's right, that's beautiful. And because they must suppress the other because it represents their suppressed, you know, if you take it Freudian.
Yeah, and
or
Taurus is the institutionalized power, and it within the Saturn Decan, this is like something that I'm referring to.
I mean, to take it one step further from that, even like to continue on in the myth, Medusa is slain by Perseus, who was a hero at the time and considered a hero for slaying her. And then he took her head and carried it around with him and used it as a weapon. And if that's not an analogy for the weaponization of marginalized communities, I don't know what is. Against one another, right? Yeah.
You can get those ideologies that are meant to protect the people that are marginalized, and you can use them to cause fear. You can use them to spread fear around, right?
Yeah, and I know we said we weren't going to really dive into this today because we're all still deeply processing. And trigger warning, we're not going to really go into this. But this coming weekend, there are protests all over the nation in the US with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So we just want to, you know, send our condolences and send our solidarities out to everyone.
Absolutely. I'll be in DC. I'll be down there at the march. So, so we talked a little bit about, you know, how her head was cut off. That's also an association with the Algol fixed star is decapitation.
Yeah.
Monstrous rage. These things that are themes of the myth of Medusa really resonate with.
Or even problems in the thyroid I've seen, or things around your throat.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's also eclipse season. So we're in between eclipses right now. And if you think of like the headless dragon, right, with the North Node, or just the hunger and the abdication of the South Node and the sort of cycle of eclipses. So, yep. Thank you all so much for going here with these symbolisms. Thank you all for being here with us as well. It's super beautiful to talk about. Do we have concluding remarks? I think I just wanted to show it's not a tarot card, but in this pack that I really love, the She-Wolf Tarot, she puts a specific Saturn card in there. And I just wanted to show it because I think it is so beautiful.
I love that.
It is.
And you know what I mean?
Head of an Anubis?
Yes. Yes, it is.
And there are the rings of Saturn there.
Wow.
Super cool, minimalistic, like Saturn
Yeah.
card. She puts a Mercury one in there too, so someday it'll get its shine on the channel. But you know what I'm thinking? I'm just like, thank you for wrapping up the basic concepts, but should we just do like a little blurb to the celebrities before we end? Should we go through like our celebrity births and nativities?
Yes.
All the people that were born during this decan of Taurus, so with their sun, and between 20 and 29 degrees of Taurus. So do you
Yeah.
have
Oh yeah.
anything that you wanted to draw attention
I
to?
want to bring up one in particular, that's Megan Fox, about what we were just mentioning on Medusa, because she's famous for one of her roles in the cinema as a demoness, like someone who embodies a demon because she's sacrificed in a ritual. They sell, like, her friends sell her out as a virgin to a cult of rock band people. And they sacrifice her, and then she comes back as a demon. That's the plot line of the movie. And then
Nice.
she eats a bunch of men and other people.
Celebrity is like, you know, not my forte.
Yeah, well, her. And so it's a very interesting movie. So, and that's just the Medusa archetype in that movie also being portrayed.
Absolutely. I thought you might want to talk about the Pope John Paul II, but I don't really have anything much to say about.
Oh yeah, he suffered a lot of attempts in his life. Like, people try to kill him a lot of times. And also, I think he was very controversial with a few perhaps retrograde kind of thinking. I'm not sure because I don't really remember. I was a really young kid when he died.
Yeah, he was considered a little bit more progressive than most other popes, and so it really had a backlash against. I mean, he wasn't by any means progressive. He was considered more progressive among a lot of traditional Catholic pieces of culture. And so there was a backlash. I think that it was the root of a lot of traditionalist backlash against this church in Rome.
Yeah, so also the ones that I like think, I mean, you've got a great list, Katie, that you put together for us. Salvador Dali makes the list, which I think is very, like, just his work just shows kind of the mood of everything we've been talking about so far. George Lucas is interesting, I think, for this kind
Star
of
Wars.
Yeah, so this kind of what do you want to call it, hero's journey theme throughout his films.
Yep.
I like Robert Pattinson, that's also a Taurus III sun, because if you look at his roles that he's most known for, Remember Me, it's a movie that has some kind of sad tone to it, and you have also the ones that started him out are of a vampire and a wizard, so very Saturnian roles as well. He dies in the first one. In the other one, he's already dead. And you have also the Lighthouse movie that recently came out that's really Saturnian as well, black and white, and has all this Saturnian vibe throughout.
Oceanography, everything, yeah.
Yes, all these illusions, faint appearances, what the hell is going on, Lighthouse, all these Saturnian sea stuff. Very, very Saturnian. And yeah, Batman.
Yeah.
Creature of the night, bats.
And
Black
God, there's
rat
so many
flies.
good.
I know. Can
Sorry.
I share one? Florence Nightingale, I thought, was a really good example of a historical figure who's born in this decan, because you think about the sort of position in which she found herself. I hear she really got a lot of recognition initially for her work to develop infographics and make, like, the first kind of summary charts of information about medical information to help spread the need for things like sanitation in hospitals. Now, and especially, thinking of her role as a female nurse in what was definitely still a male dominated, she was a senior nurse. She had medical training where women were not necessarily allowed to get medical training back then. And the horrors of war that she saw that required sanitation to be put into hospitals in the UK is where she was from. So her role as a nurse, fighting illness, working in hospitals, those are all some pretty Saturnian things, but she's a woman, and that was really the thing that people recognized most about her, and that was what she had to overcome. And she dealt with failure because she was a woman, and found other means to kind of push forward the thing she was looking for.
And that's actually, thank you. That was so good. Having the fact that you are a woman be your restriction is like a perfect kind of like keyword roundup for this Decan. Like we've said it, but not in so many words, I think, and that just illuminated it for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I was not even like, when we started talking about this, that wasn't the primary kind of framework that I was thinking of, but it's become so clear. Yeah, through discussing.
Yeah, that's really a perfect one. There's so many good ones. I don't want to stop anytime soon, but to change the pace just slightly, we've got George Carlin, who is an extremely controversial comedian and kind of like a revered like top comedian. But then in the same kind of like whimsical like comedy way, we've got Dennis Rodman, who was an outcast because of his fashion. And I don't think I want to say anything more than that, but it was like his jewelry and accessories and all of this stuff, as well as different mood and temperament things. And of course, he's a star player and all these things, but just the way he's perceived through his fashion was like a rebel-like thing or a restrictive thing, or even a thing that like opened doors for him within like outskirt communities and things like this, So I thought that was kind of cool to see those two together. As
he reveled in the outsider like image. That was, he wanted
that. Yeah, that's right.
I think, didn't he go play basketball in North Korea? Like really an outsider situation.
Wasn't B. Arthur one of those actresses from Golden Girls?
Yeah, she was Dorothy.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's like a series about being an older woman in that time society.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Yes, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so it's a very Saturnian thing as well that got her very well known throughout the world.
What's a really weird mathematical fact is that the longer that we live, the shorter time feels. And so the idea that time really does pass quicker as you get older is true.
I know. We feel that, right? We feel that.
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Bob Saget. He, his son is also an algal.
Yeah. Okay, yes, then Malcolm X, right? Whose chart we look at all the time and we're super familiar with and talk about frequently. So kind of the godfather of the Decan, shall we say.
Yep.
Okay, y'all. Well, my internet is a little Mercury retrograde-ish, so should we just try to do the out as best we can and see y'all off for this week? What do you think?
Yes, all right. So I'll just go off real quick. My name's David Fisher, and I'm in the First Place Astrology channel on YouTube. And you can find the links down below. Also the same name for my website, for my page on Facebook and on Instagram. My website is actually in the firstplaceastrology.com. And that's basically where you can find all my offerings. And I also offer tutoring, which is none of those pages announced, but you can look me up for that.
And again, my name's KD Dayton. You can find me at that kddayton.com. You can also find me on Twitter at KD Dayton. I am open for readings, both astrology and tarot. And I love just chatting people who are also students of astrology up. So especially if you're at NORWAC, please come say hi. Please come visit. I love to meet some of my online friends in person for the first time, including Elsa. Oh, just bananas. So it'll be fun.
Yes, totally hit us up at NORWAC. Please do. And thank you all for being here again with me today. This is a really enjoyable session. And thank you, YouTube. Thanks for all of you being here as well.
Awesome.
Thank you all. Have a great time. See you all next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Matauka bersama you demikian sobat. kena Tahiba nakawatima Mekana soa And soa Ataiba nake Aujuno Baikana kamaya Taonga Esa koyo Okoyo masena Kana sabaso Inagina Tabayne Toyukas Inbayatoma Wadabayke